let's talk about text and Photoshop. And we've already done text in Illustrator, and the good thing is that text in Photoshop is basically exactly the same. As a matter of fact, text is still a vector object even though we're using it in Photoshop. And what does that mean? It means we can enlarge it with no penalty whatsoever. So let's first look at the text tool. So if you hit T on your keyboard or go look in your left for the T-shaped icon, you'll see that there's some multiple things here. You can pretty much ignore these three. We don't need them. We just need the regular old horizontal type tool. And just like Illustrator, you can make both point and area text. So if I just click once, it creates area text. Now, when you're in editing mode, you have to get out of editing mode if you want to do something else. Photoshop has this little checkbox over here that you can click. Another way to get out is to hit Command Return. Another way is to hit the Escape button. And a last way is to go ahead and just change tools, and it'll kind of jump you out of text edit mode. So I'm going to draw, this is my point text, so I'm going to click and drag, and I'm going to make some area text. And I'm going to get out of that by hitting Command Return, and no real differences. The only difference, I think, for area text is if we're in editing mode and we go to move the bounding box, it will reflow the text just like in Illustrator. But if I go to Edit, Free Transform, or hit Command T, right, it will enlarge it, unlike Illustrator, where it never enlarges area text. So that's something kind of nice to use. And let me bring that back down to a little smaller. So you'll have your, well, let's actually look at the top bar, right? So if we're in Essentials Classic, we can set our different typefaces, right? I can set it to whatever typeface I want. I'm just going to leave it on Arial. Obviously, with whatever versions of your typeface, whatever faces they have, you can change your weights and your italics and things here. Then we have the sizes. So if I wanted to set my size bigger, then you're going to see this thing called aliasing, where you see sharp by default. And let me zoom in so you can see this happen. So ultimately, Photoshop, though, is a pixel-based program. So let me get even a little closer. And we can start to see those pixels there, right? Because it is kind of rasterizing it live. And this can have effects on how your items print from Photoshop. Kind of notice as I go through these different ones how the edges of it change. That has to do with just how it figures out how to make those pixels on the edges. I think we can leave it on sharp and we'll be fine for our purposes. Next, we have paragraph alignment. So we have center, left, right. And right here, color is interesting because now I have this layer selected, my type. And if I went into the color in the foreground and I change it, nothing happened, right? Because once you have text, you need to change it using this color here. There's also all of the same things I just went over, and maybe even there's leading and tracking right here. In the properties tool, so there's another color here. I could do it in either place. And now when I choose a color, right, obviously it changes that color. So it's no longer connected to your foreground background once you have type out there. You need to do it here. Besides that, I'm going to skip this one and come back to it later. We can bring up our text palettes. We could have also went to window character or window paragraph to get these two up. And in here we have a little extra amount of stuff. You see we have kerning, tracking, leading, right? So the space between lines of text. So this obviously only affects when you have multiple lines of text. We have different things we can set here. This is known as faux italic. Never use it. It's terrible. Faux bold. Never use it. It's terrible, right? We never want to change bold or italic using these ones. We only ever want to choose right, the ones that are built for the font. This is Photoshop forcing those things on, and there's a lot of problems with those. I wouldn't recommend doing it. Let's see, you can set things to all caps, small caps, underlined, etc., etc. These are about ligatures. We can ignore that. So that's pretty much most of what you need to know about type. I will say, I'll go ahead and show you this one, even though I hate it. I'm going to go ahead and select this point text and have my T tool. This is the warp area. So if you wanted to say add some kind of a warp effect, right, you could play with this to add it. I guarantee it'll make things mostly unreadable. That's why I didn't want to show you it, but I might as well at least show it to you. So that's text in Photoshop and everything you're going to need to know about making text in Photoshop to complete the exercise and Studio 2.